finished the meeting, so it's time to
Good. The trouble is, we always outlive them. It's a good thing we do, but I don't like the alternative, but still, it's so sad when they go. Exactly. And they live you no matter what you do. Yeah, amazing.
If I get up and leave, you'll know why.
Is that how they do it actually? No, I mean, it's like, I remember when they first started that whole process. Oh, yeah.
So you know how 101 doesn't go down to the water, you go down to just the
January 8th to year 2024. Welcome to the new year. It is 4:30. We are Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council. Could I get a roll call, Nova, please?
Yes. Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Jermoff? Here. Councilmember Ferlito?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Here.
Mayor Potter?
Here.
All are present.
Excellent. So first item is public comment. It's an opportunity for any member of public comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. 3-minute limitation on that testimony. If you'd like to state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it, but it's not mandatory. Anybody wishing to do so, please come forward. I don't see anybody. Nova, do we have anybody in Zoom world?
We have no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, I'll close the public comment period, move us on then to the agenda items. Order of business, one is to receive a report on activities and actions over the previous 2 years, the city's emergency operations plan and adoption resolution 2024-001, approving the updated 2024 emergency operations plan. Chip, would you like to introduce this?
I think we'll go right to Chief Tomasi, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
You know,
Paul, welcome.
We're glad because, you know, when he was on sabbatical, we didn't update this, then he came back and it was one of his first 3 dozen assignments.
You got the wrong thing up there.
That's the building. We could talk about that. Well, good evening, Mayor, Council. It's nice to be back. I'm going to knock a little rust off by doing a presentation. How about that? We're going to talk tonight about the Emergency Operations Plan. As Chip mentioned, it is a plan that we update every 2 years, and I'm here to show you that plan. A couple highlights of it. Government Code 8610 requires the city to have an emergency operations plan. In 1979, Carmel-by-the-Sea established CMC Code 2.64, Emergency Organization. In 1981, we had the initial emergency plan, and then in 93, we developed a management operations plan. In 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, the nation, federal government, wanted to develop a unified emergency response called the National Incident Management System. That is a direct result of the response to the 9/11 attacks. In 2008, the city adopted the Emergency Operations Plan, and it's updated every 2 years in June. We did miss this past June, but I did a quick update on it over the last month, and I'm here to present it so we are current and updated. And it's important that we're updated because should we have an emergency and we look for federal funds, first question we're going to have is our emergency plan up to date? And it is, if you approve it tonight. A couple of the updates over the last couple of years are some updates to the 911 system, including a new way of receiving emergency messages through text messages. Continued work with alertmontereycounty.org, which was purchased by Nixle. So through the county, we can send emergency notifications to our residents, and the push to have more residents sign up for it. We've expanded our CERT team, which is the Community Emergency Response Team, and we've developed more training for them. So we have a really robust team that's helping us through our emergencies, as we've seen over the past year. A big addition is we've added the park branch as an alternate temporary assistance center, considering the youth center may not always be available and may have some issues with that as well. So we wanted to add that. And thank you, Ashley, for including that. We've also worked on community outreach. Some of you know this past weekend we did a community outreach just being Carmel Prepares. And so that continues. And those are the highlights of it. Over the next year and a half, because it will be June 2026 or 2025, whatever, 18 months, we're going to continue with training. We have a lot of new staff, so we want to make sure that everyone's trained up on the ICS, Incident Command Structure training and method on how to respond to emergencies. I'm looking to implement new incident-specific sheets, guide sheets, to guide us through emergencies, because as you saw, our manual's about 300 and something pages, and in an emergency, finding information in it can be difficult. So we're going to do individual playbooks to help us through incidents. So I should have that developed the next 18 months. And I don't know what just happened. Oh, that's the last slide. With that, that's the presentation on the emergency operations plan, and the recommendation is hopefully that you just approve it and we put it into action. Thank you.
Staff, the council.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
When someone calls 911, where does that call go? The reason I'm asking is someone fell in Mission Trail. They called 911 and they said, "You're on Wolf Court?" And they said, "No, I'm in Mission Trail Preserve." Well, we show you on Wolf Court, and I don't even know where Wolf Court is around here. And so I was curious as to if it gets routed to different 911 answering services.
So if a resident from their home calls 911, it's going to go to our call center here in the city. Over the last 10 years, they've worked on cell towers and locations to make sure that even cell phones are coming to our 911 center.
Okay.
So occasionally somebody may have had their cell phone in a remote area like Mission Trails Park, picked up by a different cell tower, and it may have linked them to CHP or the county. And that's very rare, but it could happen. But I think we're about 99% here in our city. If you're within this geographical area, it's going to our call center here.
Okay.
Any other questions of Paul before I open to the public? Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight? Not seeing anybody.
There's no hands raised on Zoom.
We'll bring it back to council for direction. Council members?
Well, if there's no further comments, I'll make a motion to approve the city's emergency operations plan and adopt resolution 2024-001.
Yeah, just note that under outreach to media, it did not list the Monterey County Weekly as a source of information dissemination. Suggest we add that. So that's my suggestion. I trust that's included in the motion. Come please.
Yes.
Thank you.
So what we'll do, Chief, is we'll add the Monterey County Weekly into our media contacts as in one of the addendum. And then Councilmember Ferlito had, if you see, it's a long document, so if are there typos or anything that needs further explanation, Councilmember Ferlito said it just says Mission Trail Nature Preserve. Please get those to Paul and we'll clean up the document. Those are minor amendments,
Exactly.
Correct, Councilor? So,
Yes.
thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Nova, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Jerema?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards? Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Who is the second?
Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is Resolution 2024-002, reaffirming the city's public-private partnership with the Carmel Public Library Foundation. Ashley?
Top middle.
Painful. This will be less painful. Mayor, Council, thank you for letting me present on this item this evening. I'm very happy to. This is an important resolution recognizing the Carmel Public Library Foundation for all that they do for the libraries and for our community. And they were founded in 1989. This was the time of budget cuts. When the library used to be a part of the county system and was jumping off of that because it became cost prohibitive. Citizens in town got together and formed the Carmel Public Library Foundation to ensure that our operating budget was always taken care of and that the library would stay open, relevant, and thriving, and ensure free public library service forever and ever. And they fund 100% of all the books, materials, equipment, furniture, everything you see in the library, of course with the help of the Friends, but the big heavy lifting of that is the Carmel Public Library Foundation, and we're very, very fortunate to have them during the pandemic. I watched a number of my colleagues in other neighboring jurisdictions who had to make very severe budget cuts to their operating budget, and unfortunately for us, we were able to actually increase spending in our ebooks, and really were able to be nimble in responding and changing how we provided library services during a tough time, and that was definitely thanks for the Carmel Public Library Foundation. The city recognized the Carmel Public Library Foundation as an official city support group in 1992, and they have been an exemplar of that public-private partnership in action. In addition to funding all of the books, equipment, technology, programming, and material, they also have established a world-class lecture series. This grew out of a local history lecture series and some other library programming in the early days. And now we have speakers like Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, and all different types of people from all walks of life who come to our community to participate in these programs and to enrich our lives and broaden horizons. They've also worked to fund special projects such as the Park Branch Library lobby renovation, and most recently and most, I think, impactfully, the Gathering Place at the Harrison Library, which is used by our garden club. We have crafts guild that meets. We have homeschooling families in there. We had high school students during finals week take it over so they could do their group study. I mean, it's all different kinds of people for all different kinds of projects, and it's great to see it being used by that, and wonderful that we had that support from the foundation to do that, because we've never in the history of the library had a meeting space like that. And as you all know, in particular, the Harrison Library there, right there on the corner of Ocean and Lincoln downtown in Carmel, is one of the architectural jewels of our village. It serves, many different residents, families, visitors, as does the Park Branch with the local history department and the kids department. To that end, we know that the Harrison Library building was built in 1928. We've done pretty well with that, but knowing that we're coming up on our 100th in 4 years, we're starting to see some of our infrastructure getting ready to give out. So we want to be ahead of the game when we think about making improvements to our library, but also thinking towards the future in terms of resilience during storms. How can we make the libraries better serve the community that way, and continue to be those community centers? And also, thinking about library services in the future. Do our buildings still serve us well in another 100 years? Because we've done some improvements and renovations that are able to meet needs in the future. So to that end, the city did allocate a total over a few years of $150,000 for the beginnings of a master plan study for both library facilities, and that project's been moving slowly. We've been taking our time and pacing ourselves and making sure that every single comma is in the right place and I's are dotted and T's are crossed as we look to determine areas for improvement and renovation, and identify special opportunities for restoration of the historic Harrison Library. So, and I'd like to invite Alexandra Fallon, who's the executive director of the foundation, to come up and say a few words. I think that's it.
Thank you, Ashley. I just have a few words. Good evening, Mayor Potter, Chip Brerig, and City Council members. I'm Alexander Fallon. I'm the Executive Director of the Carmel Public Library Foundation. And this resolution reaffirms our long-standing mutually beneficial partnership between the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea and Carmel Public Library Foundation in support of the library and our community. And it's our hope that we continue to have the same partnership in the many years to come. And thank you. Okay, thank you.
Any questions of Ashley or Alex before I go into public? All right, don't see anything. So before I go out to public comment, I'm just going to read this. Under the Brown Act, public comments on matters on the agenda must relate to that agenda item, and the public comments on matters not on the agenda must relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of that legislative body. Hateful, violent, and threatening speech is impermissible public comment as it disrupts the the conduct of a public meeting. This is a warning that if any member of the public attending this meeting should violate the Brown Act by failing to comply with these requirements of the Brown Act, then the speaker will be muted. That noted, is there anybody in the public wishing to speak tonight? Anybody? Yes, Dale, do come forward.
Good evening, Mayor Potter, Chip Brerig, and council. This is a little tricky because my comment involves, this is on the agenda tomorrow for the painting. So it's sort of, I don't know where to put it tomorrow or today. It sort of blends in. So if I could ask for your forgiveness.
Well, you're going to speak tomorrow too? You only get one shot.
If you think I'm off base, you can stop me. It's short anyway. So having run a nonprofit, Carmel Cares, and I'm speaking as Carmel Cares, for the last 3.5 years, I have to say that I'm just blown away at what the Library Foundation has built as a 501c3 over the last 24 years. Probably not all of you have looked at their financials, but they have assets of over $12 million. Last year, they took an investment income alone of $1.7 million, and they had revenue net of expenses of over $2 million, and that's pretty fantastic, and it shows they have great support from donors, and the city's partnership, like Carmel Cares has, is fantastic. So we are going to talk about the painting tomorrow, and one thing I'm interested in is that did say that the painting was going to be related to private donations. I don't really know the business model directly that the city has with the Library Foundation. I'm going to have a meeting with Alex soon. Hopefully we can talk about that. But I might suggest that the business model that we've developed with the city over the last year of matching funds has been pretty successful with us, and I might suggest that we look at that for not just us, but for other organizations, so that we can do more and bigger projects and get them approved quickly, like we're going to do on this scenic pathway this year. I think this is also a great example of how foundations can be used, and I think we've somewhat proved it. We're certainly still growing, and the Friends of Mission Trail Nature Preserve, how organizations with 501c3s can elicit donor support to augment the city. And I've recently broached that subject with Mayor Potter and Chip and Bobby and the city attorney about doing something similar for the beach. And I'll stop there because I'd like to continue that discussion in the future when it's appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Anybody in Zoom world?
Alexis, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Good evening. This is on agenda public comment, so I can speak about the library issue, correct?
Yep, exactly. That's correct. Just the specifics of the library.
For you guys. It's about the library. That's what I'd like to talk about. I have some book recommendations in support of the local African American community. I think that we should include books by authors such as Dr. Tony Martin and the author Louis Farrakhan. Dr. Tony Martin was known for, he actually got fired for his job for writing the book known as The Jewish Onslaught, and Louis Farrakhan authored The Secret Relationships Between Blacks and Jews, volumes 1 through 3, because they were aware that the Jewish people, they controlled the slave trade, and they were the ones that brought African Americans over here, well, Africans at the time, in order to commit the vile act of slavery. In fact, did you know that all slave markets were closed on Fridays and Saturdays, but not on Sundays.
So you're drifting off topic, sir.
We're in charge of selling slaves. No,
Okay, that's next public speaker.
Chris, go ahead.
Chris Groveley. Chris, the floor is yours.
I prepared talking at first, but I promise I will get to my point. You will never be a real woman. You have no womb.
Okay, next speaker.
There's no more hands raised on Zoom.
That's it. Okay, public comment period is closed. Bring it back to council for action. Council members. I'd just like to reaffirm the relationship here between the Public Library Foundation. It's an incredible organization, really. The jobs you've done, it's impressive. I've enjoyed working with you. I'm looking forward to being a part of the team that brings forward the remodel or the renovation. Quite a process, but it's going to be a real heavy lift, so good luck.
Can I go ahead and make the
Sure.
motion that we adopt this resolution? Or does anybody else want to speak?
No, I was just going to say there's also a lecture this week that the library's putting on, and the lectures have been really wonderful for our community, and I think that's one of the highlights. And the community room that you have, or the gathering room, has been a terrific addition, and I'm just very proud of our library, and I look forward to hearing more in the very near future about how we can get it open on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's a great organization, and we enjoy. I was at the Cypress Inn event the other night. It was enjoyable to see everybody. So I would like to make the motion that we adopt the resolution 2024-002, reaffirming the city's public-private partnership with Carmel Public Library Foundation.
I'll second that.
Motion second. Any other discussion? I don't hear any. No.
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramall?
yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Excellent. All right, item number 3 is receive an after action on a report action on Thursday and an update on the farmer's market and consideration of a resolution 2024-003 authorizing the consumption of alcohol at the farmer's market third Thursday event. It's in 2024. Ashley, continues to be your show.
It can be, and you get to hear from me tomorrow night too. We're lucky all of you. Mayor and Council, this is your annual farmers market update that I provide to you every year. Just for everybody at home listening, if they're not aware of our farmers market, it's held every Thursday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Mission Street and 6th Avenue, the streets around Devendorf Park that make an L shape. Good Roots Inc. has been managing our market since 2020. They do a great job. The market, they really revitalized the market when they took over in 2020. We have new types of vendors coming in and out. And they're continuously working on 3 things that are just always going to be with us in a challenge. Improve signage, enforcing the no dogs at the market, and that is a health department criteria that we have to follow. And it can be challenging. I can tell you, I've told people no dogs at the market, and that the looks that you get and the anger is surprising sometimes. And we had a couple days this summer where it was just, you would have thought it was the dog market and not the farmer's market. So we have increased signage there and increased enforcement of that. Alongside compostable bags. The challenge with the compostable bags, of course, is, we have many vendors who go to different markets, they've got their supplies packed, they forget the compostable bags, so we have a cash on hand, and we're gonna really be upping our game with that this year, and making improvements there. The other thing that I wanna report out on is Third Thursday. So we implemented this in 2020. I came to all of you with the idea, it was actually an old idea from the original formation of the farmers market, to start a Third Thursday event, and that's featuring some of our market vendors, food, artists, demonstrations, games for kids, and music. We have now have music sponsored by Sunset Center. So those first 2 were held in September and October in 2022 respectively. We did have alcohol served at those events in accordance with our ABC regulations. And those were poured by both of the times it was handled by the Carmel Youth Center as a fundraiser for them. there was some concern after that year that this would become an alcohol-focused event. Nonetheless, in 2023, in January of 2023, the council approved the serving of alcohol at the third Thursday events being held during 2023, April through October. Alcohol was served at the April and May events, once by the Carmel Youth Center, and then they closed down. And then we did have the Carmel Residents Association pouring for one of our third Thursdays. After that, we didn't have any more alcohol at the events, and it was fine. They were very well attended, and it was very fun. So I think there was concern, one, that the things would be out of control because there was an alcohol component to this, but one, that this would be the focus of the event, and it's not. It's a nice thing to have, but it certainly isn't the only draw for the events at all. For some who attend the event, a glass of wine after work is nice, especially if you're dropping by to check out the music, or if you're visiting town and wandering through. And it is a good way for nonprofit organizations to raise some funds and to build some awareness around their events. So to that end, I would like to recommend that the council again authorize the consumption of alcohol at the farmers market third Thursday events. It may not be at every event, just as we've seen in the past. It will be contingent on finding those nonprofits to serve the alcohol, but I think reiterating that alcohol isn't the point of this event. It's not a tasting event. It is a community event that's focused on music and bringing people together, and art, and all of the things that make our village a special place. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the farmers market itself and third Thursdays.
Yes. When alcohol is served, are they required to stay within a restricted area to consume?
Yes, they are. And we kept that area pretty small. In fact, it was probably about the size of this little horseshoe here in front of the dais. It wasn't a huge footprint inside the farmers market.
And have you observed anyone bringing their own alcohol to the park and drinking it outside of that boundary?
No, and I was keeping an eye on it. The first few events that we had, it seemed like that could be an issue, but more often than not, it's reminding people that dogs aren't allowed in the park, rather than seeing the brown bags out there.
Thank you.
And we also have volunteers and police services who are there, the white shirts, to keep an eye on things and report back as well.
Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this? Is anybody in the house? Is there anybody on Zoom?
There's no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, bring it back to council for direction. Council members?
Well, I would like to say that I love the third Thursday event. I really think it's great. I don't happen to think alcohol is necessary. So that is my feeling on that. I think when there are a lot of children and people around, people should be taking care of their kids and watching over them, and sometimes they may be distracted by that, because I think there's a time and place for everything, and I just don't happen to think that that's one of them. But that's my bias.
I do agree with Councilmember Ferlito. We're creating a kid-friendly and a family-friendly environment at this event, and I just would rather not have alcohol served. And then there's also the issue of the enforcement. So I would just rather have it stay more kid and family-friendly.
Okay. Councilmember Barron?
Yeah, I think we're back where we were last year. We've heard that there haven't really been any issues. We have this really small part of the event is the serving of alcohol. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I think everybody's, I'm I'm basically completely okay with that, and I support the status quo.
Well, I've often attended these, and I found that alcohol wasn't really an issue or a problem. So I would make the motion to adopt Resolution 2024-003, authorizing the consumption of alcohol at the farmers market third Thursdays event 2024.
I'll second it. I'm a second to speak to it, I guess, but I don't think there's a problem with the alcohol at all. I think also that it's benefiting the nonprofits, especially Carmel Youth Foundation, which is great. So I'm a support.
And the last one was the Carmel Residents Association. Yeah, exactly. Is that correct? Yeah.
So with that said, we've got a motion. We've got a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
No.
Councilmember Ferlito?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2.
Thank you very much. We'll move on then to item number 4, which is discussion of the ad hoc committee's findings and recommendations on the way forward to development of the public police facility. Do you want to? I might make a couple of comments first. So we've had an ad hoc committee which was consisted of Mr. Barron and myself. We've had many meetings on this topic. We don't want to rush a decision here. We've given this a lot of good deliberation, kind of thought. But I do think that honestly, it's time we get give some preliminary direction to staff from council direction. I'm a building contractor by trade, and I know that people think that it's the easiest thing to do is go build something new. That's not the case at all. I like to go ahead and look at all the options first. We've really given this a lot of deliberative thought. But I'm of the opinion that we need to make a decision tonight about whether we want to go ahead and take a look at an alternative location. I think if you have other questions about the viability of the facility, want to get those on the table tonight, that's probably a good idea. But let's go ahead and have some discussion about what we can do moving forward. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for the benefit of the public and the 3 council members that have been so involved, we, as Dave pointed out, we've had quite a number of meetings downstairs in that cramped little conference room with Fred and Bob and these other guys, and it's just meeting after meeting after meeting, and it's been, we've tried to be very methodical. To Dave's point, we've tried to be very methodical about it, very scientific about it. We hired a professional firm that has a lot of experience in designing and building specifically police facilities. We evaluated the condition of the old, we sent them in there sort of without giving them any, ideas about what they were going to find. We sent them in there to examine the condition of the old police station, and they came back with a report. Once it became clear sort of the extent of the renovations that were going to be required, we expanded our investigation to include the possibility of moving the police station to another location or rebuilding the police station where it was. And I would say that all of this is in the context of, obviously land in the city is very valuable. A lot of the land has been, we sort of tentatively dedicated that land. The stuff that the options that you'll see, Vista Lobos and Sunset Center certainly have been sort of identified as housing opportunity sites. And so there's that. That's a factor that we've talked at length about. We've also talked at length about the impact that would have on public works, and when we talk about moving the police, sort of renovating the police station in situ, well, we'd have to move the police station and public works out of the building. There are a lot of moving parts, and a couple of things I would say are, one, I'm not convinced that there is a best solution here. I think the best solution for any individual, depends on the lens at which you're looking at the solution. And we all, there are 3,000 community members and the 5 of us, and we all have different lenses. But I really hope that we can find a solution that works and is a good solution for not only the 5 of us up here, but everybody in the community. And so I think, I know Dave and I and staff are really looking forward to a really involved community process, and this is only the very beginning of what I suspect will be a pretty involved process. So thank you,
Jeff. I appreciate those comments. I think, as my colleagues know and as the public knows, Jeff is never afraid to ask questions, and he's very direct when he asks them. He's really poignant and direct with the staff on these questions. But this has been through quite a process. But Jeff, thank you.
And I would argue, Mr. Mayor, is, the last time we touched base with the council and the community was a year ago. And it was really through the hard work of the ad hoc committee of asking those tough questions to get to the point where we are today, that they were able to present this recommendation to you. We're not at the end of the road, though. Again, what we're looking for tonight is we're looking for direction from the full council to take the next step to look at a schematic design of a new police station on an adjacent property that the city owns. And then we'll have something to target, to talk to. I see The Carrs are here in the audience. They live adjacent to Vista Lobos, and do the outreach and education, delve into the questions about financing. So this is far from a done deal. There's a lot more process that needs to happen. But the ad hoc really wanted to touch base with the entire council, have the public present so that they could hear where we've been and hopefully where we're going, and then get some direction and answer some additional questions as we come back to you, ideally next month. So, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question. So, did the ad hoc meetings include the public?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Fred, that might be your cue.
Good evening, Council. My name is Fred Muir. I've been the project manager on this, assisting the staff and the council ad hoc committee.
Sir, you're going to get rid of that.
Okay. How about this? Okay. My name is Fred Muir. I'm the project manager for the project, working with the ad hoc committee and the staff in terms of trying to respond to what really has been a question of what's the problem? How do we define the problem? And that's kind of where we are right now. And as the mayor and Councilmember Barron have said, we have had numerous meetings and site visits and so on, looking at the building as is and looking at what are the potential for the future. The architect that was hired is Indigo, and they had a very long history in the remodel of existing police stations, because you need to remember that's where we started, was how do we remodel it? Is there a way of doing what needs to be done in the existing facility? They also have a wide practice in new facilities as well, but they were the ones that were selected out of those who responded to our RFP asking for that expertise. Right now, we've only done 2 tasks of the contract. The first task was to actually bring in experts in all of the building systems, electrical, heating, plumbing, just everything, to look at the building. Because we need to remember that the building was designed and built in the 1960s, and it has never had a significant remodel. Most buildings enjoy, particularly public buildings, enjoy periodic remodels, and those remodels will very often trigger a requirement to update the code. That hasn't been the case in the police station. So the building is pretty much the way it was in 1968. The codes have changed immensely. The other problem with the building, it has not been the beneficiary of a lot of love, so to speak, in terms of investment. I know you all have seen it personally, and you can appreciate what it must be like for the police officers and public safety staff and the public to have to use that facility at times truly of personal crisis. So that was one piece of it. Look at the status of the building and look at how is it functioning today. The other piece is policing has changed immensely since the building was designed. So the other criteria we wanted to look at is what would a police department today be operating from? What should it be able to do to take care of the community, to respond to the public safety needs, the community interest needs? So how do you program the building? So as we looked at the first task, assess the building, it was pretty clear that this is not a pig that you can put lipstick on. It is in awful condition, to be truthful. The building is worn out. You have been able to squeeze just about all the life out of the building that you're going to be able to squeeze out of it. The systems are to the point that they really need to be replaced. And when you start replacing these whole systems, that triggers the requirement, because of the level of investment, to also bring it up to code. So it just sort of waterfalls. So what we had thought and hoped might be a remodel project is a project that we have found is just not feasible in that building. So a very natural question, how did we go from a few million to 30 million? It's a very logical question. This isn't really scope creep. This is really needing to redefine what the objective is. What does the Village of Carmel want for its police department to be able to do? And what sort of facility do you need to do it in? So you have the condition of the building and you have the codes. The report also identified a number of really urgent repairs that needed to be made immediately, and that has been undertaken. You may recall, some of you, seeing the water run down the wall behind the panels, and that was okay because the panels were lifted off the wall with washers. Well, that wasn't okay. So Public Works has gone in and made those repairs. And there may be other things that we need to repair, but the building is worn out. The building is incapable in its current size of meeting the needs of the police department. So what I'm going to do now is ask the chief to come up and talk about, from a policing point of view, what do you need and how do you get there with the station? Chief.
Thank you, Fred. Council, Mayor, thank you for this opportunity. We've been talking about this for several years, and it's nice to be back, part of it, and I appreciate the ad hoc inviting me to discuss this. I've been in the last few meetings, so it's nice to be up here again, and I've been working hard to get caught up on the entire project. But I do want to commend the thoughtfulness that went into this and the amount of discussions we've had regarding this project. I want to talk to you a little bit about what it truly we are looking for and what we need in a police department to take us through the next, hopefully 50 years, because we're in a building that's 50 plus years. But before we do that, it's also important to look at what services we provide. Every police department's different. Every single police department provides a little bit different services. Having been through 2 remodels at previous agencies I've worked for, I think I have a little bit of knowledge in this and a little bit of experience which I can share. But to share with you what our police department does is, you have a police function out of the police department. That includes patrol, detectives, motor officer, task force involvement, and that's to the tune of about 15 officers. We also operate a dispatch center, which is your communications, your front desk receptions, your records department, property evidence technicians, and administrative assistants, which is about 6 personnel. You have parking enforcement, which has ranged from 3 to 5 personnel over the years, which does patrol and data entry and citation processing. You have animal services, which is 1 person, which does patrol, the storage and release of animals, and data entry. And then we have a big component that we often forget about, and that's our volunteer services. We have a community emergency response team, which is currently about 30 participants, which utilize this building. And also we have our volunteers in policing services, which assist us with downtown patrols, traffic control, and event management. We have about 10 members of that right now. So you have a number of people using this existing building. I imagine 50 years ago, no one sat and thought about what is policing going to look like in 50 years, right, when they designed the building. But when they designed this building, it was based on policing 50 plus years ago. A lot's changed in policing, considering what we wear, the equipment we handle, and how we respond to calls. It's changed. No matter what we decide moving forward, the ADA accessibility between parking and this building need to be addressed. We know that. But there's other things with the police building that we want to look at, and these are what we call the needs part of this, and they're attached to the staff report in a needs assessment. The most important thing for me is security of the building, but it starts with our property and evidence storage. We've talked for years about this, and it's the ventilation and storage of our property. Again, 50 years ago, nobody thought about the dangers of drugs that are in our society. But we are in the middle of a pandemic with fentanyl. where just the dust of fentanyl can kill you. And we are packaging evidence with no proper ventilation. That we have to address in whatever police department we move forward with. We also need better storage for biohazard evidence, drying capabilities for evidence, and the security systems to hold our property and evidence to keep the chain of custody intact. Interview rooms. We need better interview rooms for when we interview suspects, when we interview victims of crimes, and even when we hold juveniles. There are legal requirements for doing this, and we need to build a police department that meet those legal requirements. That includes video recording, and then again, as I mentioned, the rooms for each of these people. Our holding and booking facilities, we need to make sure that our building is secure inside and out. Holding of a subject or a suspect involves the being handcuffed and transported back to the police station. Once we get to the police station, we have to remove that person from a vehicle. We are doing it in the back lot of our police department with no security fencing and, what's that?
I was gonna, if you'll forgive me for a second.
Sure.
A couple seconds ago, you were talking about juveniles. And, you and I had a pretty healthy conversation
Yes.
about the requirements. I wonder if you could, like, as an example of the sort of what I think a lot of people think of as so weird police requirements are. Can you talk about the specific conversation that we had about juveniles and the detention of juveniles and how that sort of works into the sort of tenor of all of these requirements?
Yes. There's a couple laws that revolve around holding of juveniles. First of all, a juvenile cannot be held in the same area as an adult for obvious reasons, protection of the juvenile. But also, if we're holding a juvenile for parental pickup, they cannot be held in a locked facility. So currently we hold them in our lobby and a juvenile could walk out. That's okay by the legal standard and we're meeting it, but we would like to provide a different area for juveniles, so not just out in the public area. Does that answer your question, Councilmember? That leads to our holding and booking facilities. We need to make sure that we are meeting those legal requirements for holding people, including suspects. Do we have the legal restraints? Are we meeting the ability to record and monitor safely, not just for the suspect's safety, but our staff safety as well? That includes soundproofing so that someone isn't speaking so loudly that maybe a victim can overhear them. That leads to victim intimidation, and we need to be careful that we're not contaminating cases that way. When we talk about site security involves fencing, maybe around our back parking lot where we put our police vehicles so we can protect people, staff, the public, and our vehicles and equipment. We want to make sure we have cameras and proximity card readers into the building, some form of keeping people in and out and restricting access. We want to make sure that we have bulletproof windows, doors, and walls, primarily in our lobby area where the public is addressing our staff. We do have some of that now, but we can, as we move forward, we'll want to fix that and make it even better. And again, I already touched on the secure parking facilities, but that would be required. When we talk about one of our services, an animal care facility, we need to make sure that we have a proper animal care facility. Are we able to provide care for animals that we're holding? Can we provide soundproofing so the constant barking of dogs or whatever noises they make aren't disturbing our neighbors? And then are we storing deceased animals correctly? How's that done? How are we doing it? How are we releasing those animals? All part of the thought you want to have with this police facility. But the big thing I want to talk about is storage and flexibility. I already mentioned that policing has changed so much over 50 years. We have much more equipment. We're no longer just rolling out of the police station with a gun, a badge, and a set of handcuffs and a radio. We're carrying a lot of equipment. We respond to a lot. The service we're providing the community is much more than they used to 50 years ago. We need storage for a lot of that equipment. We need the ability to have the technology in the building that we design and change. When we talk about flexibility, we really want to design a police department or remodel a police department with flexibility. I can't tell you what policing is going to look like in 25 or 30 years. But if you have rooms that are flexible and you can change, that will make a big difference. And my example in that is our current Emergency Operations Center, which is in the basement of the police department, built in the 60s as a bomb shelter, which was appropriate for that era. That room is not, we're not able to change that room. It's set as an Emergency Operations Center. It'd be great if that was a community room or a training room, but it's not accessible. It doesn't provide the AD accessibility. It just isn't flexible. Most modern police departments have a community room, a training room, or a briefing room that can be converted to an Emergency Operations Center if needed. It doesn't live there permanently as that when it's only used 1/100% out of the time, right? We just don't use them that often. So creating a building with flexibility is very important for the next phase of this. And then I added this last bullet, which isn't even on your needs list, but it's independent power source. We have a generator now attached to the police department, so if we lose power, we can still operate. But if we look to the future, as we move towards more operated vehicles, EVs, we should consider a battery source or electric charging station to continue to provide emergency services to the public should we not have power. Those are the highlights of the needs list which you have in your report. And I'll turn it back to Fred, unless there's any immediate questions.
I have a question. Don't you need like locker rooms and decontamination zone and stuff like that?
There are, locker rooms are on the needs list. I just didn't highlight it in here. We have those existing now, but that's also a need, yes. Thank you.
The locker rooms that we have now don't come close to meeting the need for locker rooms today. I mean, 50 years ago, he would not be wearing the vest that he's wearing right now. And when it's a hot day, heavy day, that vest needs to dry out. Right now, there's no ventilation in the locker rooms to dry out the equipment. So that's just an example. When they go into the locker room, they've got their radios, they got their cell phones. So you need the capability in the lockers to both secure the equipment as well as to charge it. We don't have that capability now. They go look for an outlet to put their phone charger in so that when they're ready to go, they can pick up everything. It shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to search the station to get all your equipment together because the station is distributed in its power supply. So those are some of the examples. But when you take what the chief said in terms of his description of where we are now and some of the shortfalls that we have now, couple that with the requirements of posts, the police officer standards and training that the state puts out, and couple that with the requirements that are listed in the International Police Chief Association's recommendations for police stations. What do you get out of all of that? Well, the calculations that we have right now is that we need about 2/3 of an acre to a 1 acre site and a building substantially larger than what we have now, very substantially larger, to incorporate all of this stuff, all of this activities, and to provide the community with what they need. Whether that community be the CERT team and a place for them to meet, train, and so on, or whether it be an EOC, or whether it be an adequate place to interview a victim who has just suffered some horrendous crime against their person. And right now they get interviewed in the lobby. We can't do that. We've got to have the kind of quality space that the chief is talking about. So those were the standards we made. We hired an architect with expertise in that. We have a chief who has gone through 2 remodels. This will be his 3rd. And we have estimates. Now, when you read that, you say, well, that generates about 150 questions. How much? How is that laid out? What does it look like? And so on. That's why I go back to where we started with the mayor and council members saying, we've been defining the problem. And the problem definition is the current building is past its useful life. And what we want is a police facility that will meet this community's requirements for 50 years. So we defined the problem. Now we need to move into the first step of how do we do that? And again, the ad hoc committee has looked at a number of different things. So the first thing is there a way of remodel? That was the concept we went into this for. I think we've demonstrated that the remodel concept is totally, it's not going to meet the mail. You would be inadequate the day you had the ribbon cutting, grossly inadequate the day you had the ribbon cutting if you just tried to remodel the existing facility. We know we need to meet current standards, because if you don't meet current standards after you've invested a lot of money, you create a lot of exposures that you don't want to create. And as the chief said, we want something that will be flexible for the future. And that's how you design something. As you would be designing a house today, you would think, what kind of flexibility might I need in the future? So what are the potential solutions? As we looked at how do we do this quickly, because the current condition is really unacceptable. We need a new police facility as quickly as we can get it. So that was sort of the touchstone. How do we get to the end game? Well, I will go through a couple of the options, but just bottom line up front, you get there the quickest by going to a new site, allow the police to operate where they are now, and fix what has to be fixed right now, but get on with picking a new site and with developing the design, the financing, and so on of a new facility. What did they look at before they arrived at that conclusion? What they looked at was, well, could we rehabilitate and expand the building on site? Because what we discovered when you start looking at the requirements, there's not enough room on the current site for both public works and police. So if that's the case, where do you put public works and police while you're remodeling the site for the new police department, if that's what you would decide to do? So after looking at that, the committee said we probably should dismiss this option. When you looked at the next option of could you rehabilitate and expand this site without public works displacement, the answer to that is geometrically, there's just not enough space. So that one was dismissed. And finally, one was looked at, well, why don't we just demolish the whole existing site and rebuild everything new there? Again, there is not enough room, but you also suffer all of these additional costs of relocation costs and interim costs for where do you put everybody, because there's nothing really available to do that, plus the additional costs. So that's how we came to the conclusion that the subcommittee decided this is the best way forward of a new site for a new facility. Now, an important thing to remember, we just have abandoned the existing building. What we know about the existing building, that it does not meet the conditions that are appropriate today for occupancy by any public agency. It needs a whole lot of work that needs to be fixed. So what has happened, we have morphed from a rehab concept of the current station to a new station, and have further discovered, because of the research the committee did, that we just can't walk away from the Public Works Department because there's too much that needs to be fixed. So that's how we got to what you're reading in your staff report. Let's first look at a new site and a new station that meets the standards for 50 years. That led us to what are the sites? When you start thinking about what are sites that the city currently controls, because acquisition of a site would be very difficult and expensive. And what are the sites that are large enough that could conceivably handle this new police department? Well, we have three. The existing site, the Sunset Center parking lot, and Vista Lobos site and parking lot. So I won't insult you by reading all of the pros and cons, but you already know what the pros and cons. Intuitively, you know that a Code 3 response out of Sunset Center probably doesn't coordinate well with the opera that is going on inside the building. I mean, there's a conflict of uses there. There are other conflicts of city objectives. What came out of the work that Public Works and Planning did on this list was there's really no reason we can't plan for mixed use. On this new facility, we know that one of your big issues in hiring employees is housing. Well, it could very well be that we ask the architect to conceive of a mixed-use design on whatever site they ended up with. Because the goal would be to not lose any of the housing units. The subcommittee made it very clear. We've got a housing obligation. It is a very high priority. We need to make sure we figure out how to continue pursuing the housing units that are in your RENA numbers. So unless there's any questions that I'll defer to our planning director on, I'll go on to the next slide in terms of
Could I
pros and cons.
ask a quick question,
ma'am.
Mr. Chair? Could you give us the current square footage of the police building and then the lot as well, so as a comparison, because you gave us some.
Order of magnitude, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Bob. I want to say 3,000 square feet plus or minus for the operations area that you think of as the police department. Then you go down, it's kind of a similar footprint to the EOC, which is not all that useful. Then you go down to the range that is a range. So basically, we're going from 3,000 to the target that we were talking about, almost tripling the space, essentially.
So 3,000 for each level, you're saying?
Order of magnitude. But the functions that the chief was focusing on this evening in terms of the police functions, the security and so on, those are the functions that really ought to be on that top floor that exists right now, but there is absolutely no room to do that. We had talked, you may recall, in the material we sent you, there was an option of expanding the site. The building was originally designed, thinking of flexibility, to allow for the development of another building on what's called on the plaza now, where the flagpole is. That may be a great idea as you're thinking about how do you deal with that site in the future. But what we found was even with that additional building and the existing building, there was insufficient space for both public works and police on the current site.
Okay, thank you.
The ad hoc committee looked at a number of things here, and I've already talked about the conditions. I've already talked about the fact that if you make the level of investments necessary to bring the existing building up, you trigger new codes, new seismic codes, fire code, plumbing codes, handicap codes. All of those put huge expense onto the project, but they are required because of the level of investment you have to make to essentially put in a whole new electrical system, to put in a new heating ventilating system, and so on, all of which are needed. Because right now, when it rains inside the building as much as it rains outside the building. And that just is not an acceptable condition, even for public works. They can wear their slickers inside, but they shouldn't have to. So this is what they were looking at. They realized that we have both opportunities and requirements. And a requirement, we can't leave the existing building as is. We can't walk away from it. We can't leave the existing failing systems in place. We need to aggressively go after the repair of that facility. And when we do that, we need to meet the codes. From an opportunity point of view, if you think about, okay, we've moved PD to this new site, which may be Vista Lobos, it may be something else. I mean, we got to start someplace with the analysis, the environmental documentation, and all of that. So that's kind of what we're setting up right now. But you have a real opportunity in this existing building. Would that existing building with an expansion, after you've invested in, I'll call it gutting the building back to the structure and upgrading the structural to meet current seismic requirements for a non-essential purpose, what could be there? That could be the site of mixed-use housing. That could be the site of co-location of planning so that you have a permit center. I mean, right now you run your citizens and your contractors pretty much all over the village trying to get their permits done, having a permit center, which many cities do today. So we don't know yet. I mean, as you'll see in the recommendations from the ad hoc committee, one of the things we would want to do is to not only be looking at the new police facility, but what are the highest priorities for the community on the existing facility as we think about, if we're going to make a big investment to repair the building, what do we repair it to? Because function very often drives the form of what you want. So part of what you want to do is, What would you like to do from a highest priority? So that would be a somewhat separate planning process. But that's a real opportunity for the community, because any land in this community is so valuable, you can't underuse it, so to speak. Financial implications. The council had appropriated money for I'll call it a relatively small remodel. We knew it was inadequate from day one because as we got into, well, what does a remodel mean? It wasn't coming close, but it has laid the financial foundation for doing the analysis to define the problem and help us then define what are the options for solution of the problem and what are the opportunity costs, environmental costs, land costs. How do you trade off what you need? And hopefully we can get through that with the funds that are currently appropriated. A new police facility, depending on the sites you actually pick, depending upon what are the functions that you absolutely have to put in. Order of magnitude right now, $20 million. It could be plus 20 million, it could be less than 20 million. But anybody in the building trades now that is going to try and predict the cost of something 3 years from now, we know that it's a guessing, but it's a start point to start thinking about. When we look at the existing building, we're talking $10 million just to bring the existing building up to current codes and specs in terms of the functionality of the building, in terms of stripping out all of that concrete that is there, that is part of the roof, because the membrane underneath the concrete is what is leaking. So those are the financial implications that we know right now. But again, we're at the start point. We need to develop what is the best strategy for actually making this happen. It's probably not going to be a bake sale, but it's going to be something pretty significant. And that's why if you're going to invest at that level of significance, you want to invest for 50 years, not for 5 years. When you look at the specific recommendations of the ad hoc committee that the mayor and Councilmember Barron have referred to, is we'll bring back to you these recommendations for your final approval. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. We're really looking for any guidance. But basically adopt a decision that at the next meeting of what the target is. You want a police department that's going to serve the village and meet all the codes and specs, hopefully for the next 50 years. But that really ought to be a council policy that you embrace and articulate, because that'll be the touchstone, because some of you will be gone from the council by the time we get to the grand opening, and we need to make sure that we are always in touch with stated council policy as we're going through this process. The committee recommends that you direct the staff to develop the schematic design process. The schematic design process, the concepts that will be developed, are going to answer many of the questions that the community naturally will have, and that you already have, because you know more than the community, because the community hasn't had the benefit of walking through and seeing the actual condition of the building. But we have to get to the schematics and the concepts to actually start putting more accurate dimensions on everything. As I mentioned, a suggestion will be to direct staff to, in parallel, start now with the developing the programming for the Public Works, what's now the Public Works Police building, for what are the community's highest priorities for the future, so that we know what we want to build for. We can spend a ton of money to fix the electrical and so on, but if there are some unique things, like workforce housing, we ought to include that in the design of the electrical system. So form always follows the function, and that's what we're trying to get to. Let's define the form. And then finally, direct the staff to look into the initial strategy for financing a project of this magnitude. You haven't done one this size probably in a long, long time, even if you backdate the dollars to then dollars. There are lots of ways of doing it. In Salinas, the Salinas project, they have a new police department, And they decided that they were going to do this as a project with the private sector. They essentially had the private sector build the building, and they're kind of renting it back from the private sector for the next 50 or 99 years. I don't know the exact details. But public-private financing is not unusual in today's environment. There are drawbacks with doing something like that because you're a renter rather than an owner. But those are things that you can think about. But we don't know what the right answers are. What we are looking for is at the next council meeting that you direct staff to take on the 4 things that the committee has recommended. And we go forward and start answering the questions that we know you'll have. Any questions for tonight?
Any questions for Fred? Report. I don't see any. There's a moment, Fred. Well done. Go ahead and take it out to the public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on this item tonight?
There is.
Good evening. I'm David O'Neill, speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors for the Carmel Residents Association tonight. And we spoke at length about this, and we agree that something definitely needs to be done. And we want to make sure that our police department is treated with respect and has what they need. We would like to have members of the public be a part of the ad hoc committee before any major decisions are made or more money is spent on studies or design, things like that. Thank you.
Appreciate your input, David. Thank you. Anybody else? Sure. Could come forward.
Yeah, we're aware. Yeah. Just mention we will design accordingly. Won't violate our own rules.
Hi, my name is Andy Carr. Chip referred to us living on the street. I'm one half of the Carr family, and I want it to go on record that we love Carmel Police. We love them being around the block from us. We would love them being across the street from us. That right now we don't see the location as an issue. The issue is that $30 million is going to be like, if you've ever built, you know that $30 million, if you say it fast, doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's a lot of money. And if they say 30 million, it's going to be 40 or 45 million. That's a major concern for myself, my husband, as residents of Carmel, on how this will be paid for and funded. In addition, the city property, I feel, should be analyzed before any more money is spent to find out the highest and best use for the property that we own, so that when we go forward, it will be in the best, what we're doing will be in the best interest, and we're not going to be looking back and saying we wish we had done something else. In addition, we also feel that the public needs to be involved in any further discussion. We have so many smart people in this community, and they have a lot to offer, and they look at things in a lot of different ways, and that would benefit our community.
Annie, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Dale, come on up. Be shy.
Thank you. Great presentation. Did a really good job, and I appreciate the time that Mayor Potter and Councilperson Barron has put in, and Fred Muir, of course. A few things. Have we looked, I know you're not going to answer me, but have we looked at how much the Vista Lobos property is worth? And are you, since we're making improvements to the park, are you talking about the park and the parking lot? And again, you're not going to answer me this second, but I'd like to understand that at some point. And so if we could find out how much that property is worth and it could be sold, then could we use that money to make acquisitions of property around the current facility? Because there are some housing units, there's a hotel, there's a Carmel Youth Center, and everything's negotiable. I know you'd think it's out of the question, but I doubt it. So could we make use of that entire block to do something? For instance, if you moved out of the youth center, then you would have that space, or if they moved out of the youth center somewhere else, then you'd have that space to use in the interim time. So that's a creative solution. Also, what about the south lot at Sunset Center? I spent a lot of time there maintaining gardens, and there's quite a bit of space there that's not really, I would say, being used to the fullest. And that property might be something to look at as well. I'm sure there's some other ideas, but that's enough for tonight. Thank you very much.
Dale.
Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to testify? Spry young man.
Well, Ken White, members of council, I do have to say that the staff members doing the presentation, Fred and Paul, they could sell blocks of ice to Eskimos. They were terrific, just terrific. I'd like to, first of all, tell you, you're the third council that's had this problem, believe it or not. I hope the committee that's looking at this has gone back and looked at the record and plans that have been proposed in the past. I'm not saying they will all work, but at least it's a start. Let me go through a couple of buildings in town that we have done, old buildings. One is Sunset Center. The plan was to tear the whole thing down, theater, and add it about a 1,500 square foot, 1,500 seat edifice. The council wisely decided, let's just keep it in the structure boundaries and do that. What it went from 17.5 original to 22 million. That's kind of a boost. I would also like to point out the fire department. The fire department was infinitely older than the existing police department and infinitely farther out of code than anything at the time. Council decided in those years to remodel the existing fire department. Cost a lot of money, but it's kept as the cherished building right in the middle of town, which is where it should be. I'm concerned about, talk about moving. Where would you move it? Well, South Lot, as Dale said, or in the Vista Lobos Park. But then you're in a meeting, if you move it up there, you don't have a parking problem because it's a parking lot you'd be using. I would like to encourage the council to take a deep look at remodeling the existing with additional square footage. You might have to go up a story. I don't think anybody complained about going up high another level. But I think that it's a better idea to keep it where it is in relationship to the city than putting it up in, which is surrounded by two R1 zones. You want to remember that the north of that Vista Lobos is R1, and to the east of Vista Lobos is R1. And I think that's a kind of a crucial point that you ought to really deeply think about. I would like to see us really zero in on the existing station, and again, added square foot. Where do you go when you're doing the remodel? Well, you do what the fire department did. You go to Vista Lobos temporarily. And you got a lot of electrical equipment. I understand that. The fire department had some too. So I would suggest you look deeply at remodeling what we own and what we should be using. And that's all I have to say. And thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Welcome back. Carrie
Tice. This is an issue dear to my heart, so I just had a couple things. Great, Fred, thank you. He always gives good presentations. I think we need to add a column to your chart here, and that column is income. What these pieces of property can generate in income to pay for a much needed remodel. I think that housing is not just defined as our housing element, but it's also defined as hotel. 12%, 10% TOT could definitely, a new hotel on one of the prime pieces of property we have, Vista Lobos, that has one of the best views in Carmel, what potential that could bring as a hotel, I'm sorry, Chief, rather than a police station. And think of it, another place that the police station could go. The other thing is, at this, there was mention of parking being given up. The nice thing about Vista Lobos, it's built into a hill. There could be lots of underground parking that could be paid parking. So that's, I think we're missing out on the income generation from these potential land sites. I agree, we need the best use of the property, but and I agree with what somebody said earlier, and Fred said, public-private partnership. Make a list of what you want and where you want it, and let some developer come in who has done this and develop a private-public partnership. Now, in order to do that, the developer has to have some type of income, whether that's parking or a hotel, but allow them to come up with some ideas of what could be put in the existing piece of the Public Works and Police Station, and properties like Vista Lobos and the Sunset Center. So please take a look at the mixed-use design and consider housing more broader than just the housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Good to see you. Anybody else wish to speak tonight in the room?
Good evening. My name's Eric Miller. I concur with what Carrie's saying. There has to be income associated with that property. It's probably the nicest property in Carmel. The views are amazing. And so it seems like putting a police station up there isn't the highest and best use. And as Carrie said, you could really, put 600 parking spots up there underground, and that would bring in $3 million a year to the city. If you had a 200-room hotel there, you would bring in $7 million a year. That's $10 million a year to the city. And you can have the RFP require that the developer put in the police station, saving another $20 million. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done with the ad hoc committee. Obviously, we need a new police station, but at the same time, that could make the city sustainable. And coming up, the city borrowing $20 million and building that police station, you're not looking to the future relative to income. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the room? Last call in the room. We'll go to Zoom. Nova, what do you got?
There's no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, close the public comment period, bring it back to council.
Someone just raised their hand. I don't know if you want to.
James Ardes. Okay, James, the floor is yours.
James, go ahead.
Am I muted? Am I muted now or unmuted?
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. My name is James Ardiz. For the record, that's spelled A-R-D-A-I-Z. I live across from Vista Lobos at 1 Southeast 3rd and Torres. And I just have a few comments. First of all, I want to say that I'm not opposed to the police department being put on the Vista Lobos property. I do appreciate the comments about the view and also the comments about potential uses, since one of the reasons I live there is because of the view. But that being said, it seems to me that with respect to the speakers and the advocates for this report, that much of it is premature. There are a lot of conclusions in the summary without any substantive explanation or factual determination as to whether these things are correct. You're talking about a huge expenditure of money, and I think realistically it would be far larger than the sums being talked about. And I think that needs to be evaluated before further money is expended. But again, I want to say I'm not opposed to the police being there. I come from a law enforcement background. I was the chief of homicide for the district attorney's office. I was a judge and spent 30 years as a trial and an appellate court judge. I think I understand this issue. But the point being that I think the recommendation here is a site selection that's based upon a lot of assumptions to support that site selection, and those assumptions aren't necessarily supported by anything that's been presented here. There are a lot of oral statements, but there's no real evaluation. And I think that evaluation needs to be done. There are a lot of considerations here. I do understand the chief's comments. I'm not sure that the demands on the Carmel Police Department are necessarily the same as would be on an urban, a heavily populated urban area outside of Carmel. And I don't think you can compare Carmel to Salinas or some other areas, not to denigrate any of those areas. But my point simply being is I think the council should defer this, do a further evaluation in depth of the needs of the police department and how those can be accommodated. And if the end result is they need to move and this needs to be done, it's a necessity, then fine, build it there. And I'll be one of the people over there offering to help in terms of needs. But I recommend and urge the council to defer and send this back for further evaluation of some of these issues so that you can actually see the analysis, the need, and compare it factually. And I don't see that here. These are just oral recommendations that have huge ramifications. And I really think that you should step back because all of these things implement huge costs for the community, study costs, design costs, and we need to determine first whether those are necessary. So that's really all I have to say, and I appreciate everybody's input, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, James. I appreciate your input. Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on the Zoom world? I don't see anybody. All right, Fred, did you have anything that you wanted to respond to from the public comment satellites before I go back to council?
A couple of things. I understand what the judge said in the last comments. He has not probably been through the building or had the benefit of seeing the assessment of the building to really appreciate the current condition of the building and the need to move on quickly. Many of the comments had to do with getting more information, and that really is the next step. Until you actually do the schematics and the layout, you really don't have an appreciation of what is feasible and what is not feasible. We're trying to move the decision-making to the point that you actually have preliminary designs that says, okay, this would be what you would need in Vista Lobos. I mean, what would be left? What would be the potential there? Because there's really potentially, you can, depending on the cost, you can dig underground garages easily. It might well be that you have a police station and an underground garage there, if that's what you want. But it's really moving on and getting to the next piece of doing, I'll call it professional technical designs and analysis, and move us past just the discussions so that we have the detailed information to allow the subcommittee to make a recommendation to the council on the best way forward. I'll go back and re-listen to all of the comments and think my way through them and develop a recommendation with the staff to come back to the ad hoc committee in terms of next steps. And if it's important to the council to defer this, not to the February meeting, to the March meeting, so be it. We need to get it right rather than to get it on schedule.
I might just add to what Fred just said too. That's why we wanted to come back, the ad hoc wanted to come back to this council now to get direction, because we didn't want to get any further down the road of getting expenditure, additional monies without getting direction from council and having to have some public input. That was our first reality check here tonight.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Has there been any analysis of the area that is on Junipero that is under the building and has those storage units there?
No, ma'am. That's the very thing that the next steps. We've got to do surveys. We've got to do geotechnical. We need to find out exactly, are we talking about granite or sand? Or are we talking about both in terms of that particular site? We need a site survey of the existing building just to see what are the dimensions, what are the geotechnical realities as we go forward. So that really is the next step, to do that type of technical analysis to be able to answer the very good questions that both council members and the public have brought up tonight.
Because I would think it would be of paramount importance to actually analyze what is there under that park, to know if we could design a police station that would front on Junipero and still be able to have the mixed use on top and so on, and without doing that analysis simply of the soil and what's under that soil, I think is premature to just steer us towards Vista Lobos only. I fully understand the condition of the police department. I fully understand that we need a new building, not just a remodel there. And we have the existing site. We have a very valuable site at the south end of Sunset. We would not want to do this on the north end of Sunset because we do have the parking needs, and we also do have a housing element that we have marked for that. We don't want to lose any of the housing element sites if we can avoid it. And I am also concerned with the cost of remaking the area that we have now and what we do in the interim when that's happening. And I do think we should be looking at taking back the Carmel Youth Center building if we need to. We have the Mission School now empty. Carmel Youth Center could look into relocating and leasing that site, and they would have classrooms and playgrounds. I think we have to think on a big plane right now and look at all the possibilities. And I do think that this has come along to this point without very much public input. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that there might be other ideas out here regarding financing, there might be other ideas regarding building, that they're not comfortable yet being moved to make a decision that it's definitely going to Vista Lobos today.
I think the most important thing, I'm sorry, Matt, sir.
Go ahead.
The most important thing to say, that isn't a decision. Basically, nobody is saying at this point in time that this is the way it's going to be. What we're really trying to do is to narrow the number of things that we look at to make the next level investment to actually produce the information that you need to make the decision.
Okay, so this initiating the schematic design process for conducting at Vista Lobos. Okay, what is the time? What is the cost? What does that involve? I don't understand what that process is, and I'm not sure that the public understands what that means, the schematic design process.
Basically, we will come back to you when we actually execute that with estimates, because initially we were looking at schematic designs of I'll call it the current building in terms of remodeling it. We have one other schematic design, but that was for a undetermined site. In other words, look at a building, okay. That would be interesting, that would be part of the question, but as soon as we did that for an undetermined site, we would get the question, well, where is it going to be? Because that could dramatically change. So basically, this gives us the first site to look at. It might well be that when we get in there, we find something geotechnical or something in the soils or something in the survey that doesn't work, because there are limitations on that site, sightline limitations and so on. But we're in this conundrum. You want the answers, but we need to spend some money to get the answers that are good enough to present you, as I think it was the last gentleman that said, that are based on analysis and data. Now, we do have quite a bit of data on the condition of the building, but again, as the mayor said, we came back to you tonight to report, okay, here's what we found. It was a disappointing surprise. I guess we were kind of surprised that the building was in as bad a shape as it is, but it is. So now what do we do? Again, if the goal is to have a police department that meets the current needs as articulated by the chief and has been reinforced by the architect, if that's the goal, that sort of sets the boundaries of the size of parcel we need. There aren't a whole lot of parcels of that size. Again, we're up against the wall of time. This is not something that can or should drag out years. We need to be able to get you information back within months. I know the architect is online. We can ask him right now, okay, if you were to, I'm setting you up, John. If you were to be asked, okay, what are the preliminary things that you need to do besides soil survey and surveys to start developing the schematics for the Vista Lobos site? When could that be back for the council to consider so they can actually look at the impacts? What would be the answer to that question? And John, I hope you're still on. Is he still there? John Buchanan? Right. Yeah, he's still. John, can you answer that question that I just set you up for?
Jonathan?
I think I gave him permission to unmute, so. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
All right. So I'm sorry I was having trouble trying to get into the meeting, so I kind of missed the question. What could you repeat that, please, Fred?
The question right now. The question the council member just asked it. Let's say that they decide at their next city council meeting to authorize going forward with the schematic concepts for Vista Lobos. What are the types of things you would need to do to develop a schematic design that allows them and the public, more importantly, to understand the impacts and the possibilities of Vista Lobos with respect to maintaining a housing component through mixed use, maintaining the need for the program that we've described for the PD, and maintaining the need for parking potentially. So if you were to get that assignment after the council makes a decision, what sort of next steps would you envision, and how long would those next steps take?
Yeah, well, currently within our contract, we're scheduled to do, some schematic, or actually, possibly somewhat earlier level of design. I call it conceptual design, to see what we could fit onto the particular site. To work with that site, now that it's been identified as a potential site, we would definitely need, and I think the council people have addressed this in their questions and discussion, we definitely need a survey, and we need a geotechnical report to find out what's under there and how difficult it would be to work with the existing soils conditions. Obviously, we need an analysis of any sightlines and view corridors that would restrict the development. And the idea has been posed by a number of people in the meeting that perhaps it should be a mixed use development. Usually mixed use means, one use on top of another. That's one possibility. It's another possibility that there may be room for this, the police station and a significant amount of housing, but we haven't studied the site to see what is possible there. As far as time is concerned, I don't think it will take very long, several months, but maybe 3 or 4 months. If we start mixing in public meetings and reviews, of course, that adds additional time, but it won't be a very long period.
John Paul.
To study that particular site. Yeah.
Let me ask another question that I think I heard one of the other council members mention, or the public. Could you articulate in a little more detail why the co-location of the police and public works really wouldn't work on the current site? That if we use the current site, one of them has to go, and we don't know where that is. So that was kind of how we were able to say we need another site. But could you describe in more detail what you found as you were looking at it, both from a seismic point of view and so on?
Yeah, I think the most difficult problem is parking, getting adequate, secure parking. The current parking lot is not adequate, has no accessibility, there's no accessibility for the building, and it's simply not big enough. It would be possible if, to take that site and use the whole site and have Public Works move out, then I think it would be quite possible to have the police station there, but then you have Public Works. You have to find a new site for them, so.
And may I expand for the council and the public when we're talking about secure parking? We're not talking about a parking lot. We are talking about a lot where police officers are transferring prisoners, where police officers' cars are with very sensitive equipment in the cars. Every station across the country, or most every station across the country, if you go over to Monterey right now, they're in the process of building the fence around their parking lot, because today, as sadly as it is, police are targets. And right now, what you have is just incredibly vulnerable to almost anybody. And it would be nice if you could close it off, but if you close it off, you've just closed off your handicapped access, because that's how we handle handicap access, coming to the back of the building at the very same place we transfer prisoners. And that's why that site is just so difficult now from an operational point of view. We have really been blessed that we have not had a problem of significance. We don't want that problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think where the ad hoc, what Councilmember Dramoff and I talk about it pretty frequently at our individual updates, are these generational priorities that things in the village that we work on, and then we mothball for a while, and we work on again. And I think that I took pretty good notes about what all the speakers were talking about, and what the ad hoc was talking about is these parallel streets that are coming down to the gore that they're going to eventually meet, and we're gathering information on all of them. So I think that, to Councilmember Filito's question or line of questioning, what we're trying to do is get the council's permission to glean the next batch of information, so that we can share it with the community and share it with the council to ultimately get to the best possible solution. And as the mayor was saying, we as in the ad hoc members of the council, as well as staff, we're trying to touch base with the council to give you an update, but also to get your permission to move to this next phase of information gathering. And that's really what we're looking for tonight, because some of the questions that are being asked, we can't answer yet. But as we delve more into it, and unfortunately that does entail more time and more money, we can't answer them. But no matter what the ultimate solution set is, when those two streets end up, we'll have the body of information to say, these are the findings, this is the basis for which we created this decision point, or this is why something worked that we didn't expect to work when we were going down these two parallel streets.
Can I make some comments?
Yes.
Thanks, Maris. First, I want to thank everyone for all the time and effort. This has been a whole year-long process, and no doubt a lot of energy has been put into it. So thank you, everyone who has participated in this. I do agree with Andy Carr and Mr. Ardis that likely this will end up being more than $30 million. It could be 40, it could even potentially be 50. So my number one concern is, how do we finance this? How do we pay for this? And I certainly would like Chip and staff to be able to work to find us some of those details. Regarding the Vista Lobos location, I'm concerned about the loss of open space and the loss of parking, and you certainly would not be able to do a public parking underground for security reasons. We all remember what happened in the 1990s with the World Trade Center. I mean, you could potentially have somebody do a car bomb underneath the police station, so we can't have any kind of public parking underneath there. I'm also concerned about the loss of the gun range at the current site, because that is very valuable for the officers, and it's something that saves them having to travel a very far distance to be able to do practice. I certainly agree that we need more community input, more public involvement in this, and especially we need to hear more from the neighbors of this location and their concerns. I definitely like the idea of exploring the youth center, as that already is city-owned land, so we could potentially expand into that. So I think that does need to be explored. And we could also explore perhaps the police like a complex taking over the site of Public Works, and then we find a new location for Public Works. I do like Ken White's idea of remodeling the existing area and just adding more footage. And I definitely think we need more time. I just don't want to push us into this in this sense of urgency and immediacy. This is a huge, staggering amount of money, and we don't want the taxpayers stuck with the bill. So I think we need to absolutely spend the time to get the financing understood, how that's going to work, and really, we've come so far, but we still need more time on this before I feel comfortable moving forward. Thank you.
I do actually have a question that I think you can answer. It's not a future question. And that is, can you explain to me the difference? I heard about this view shed ordinance or covenant that we have in that area. Is there a difference between the view shed in the Vista Lobos versus the police compound, public work compound right now?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. So there is an actual demarcated view shed across the Vista Lobos site. It's a angular swath that goes from, I guess, the northeast corner to the southwest corner, right across the middle. And it's a protected view shed where there's an 18-foot height limit. It's actually the only one we have in town. So that's codified, that's in our zoning code.
So there is impossible to go higher than 18 feet in the Vista Lobos area.
Along that
part
swath.
of it.
So it doesn't cover the whole site, but yeah, right down the middle.
And then what about where the public work and police compound is now?
That's the underlying zoning height. So there's no special limitations to height there. It's not a scenic view shed or anything like that.
What is was it 24 feet?
I think it's 30 feet.
30.
Is it 35? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
The view shed is the constraint on the Vista Lobo site that as you were doing the concept, you'd have to take that into consideration. But remember, it also goes way down too, where you would probably do a lot of excavation, and that's why you would want to do the geotechnical to see if you can actually bring the station down as low to Junipero as you can, because if you start building higher, you're talking elevators and other issues associated with public access.
Well, I think just knowing with that information, I mean, that might help. If I think what Carrie mentioned was an interesting idea, public-private type of a thing, but right there, that would determine that there could be nothing higher than 18 feet on the Vista Lobos lot.
Yes, sir. It is, every site has its own opportunities and constraints.
Right.
And that is an important constraint for that.
But it would be 35 feet at the police. Okay,
yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I'm very interested in finding out what is actually there topography-wise and the components of what it might be if we totally excavated that site. If that is the chosen site, I would also be interested in as much as of the in and out of vehicles and so on being on Junipero, not on the residential street above. That the cars would zoom in and out down on Junipero where it would not be as disturbing to people. So I think what we need is sort of to see a list of all the things we've talked about tonight, such as mixed use, such as topography and composition of the dirt. I think Carrie mentioned something very interesting about the best and highest use of something would we be taking a site that could have tremendous income ability in the future and turning it into the police station when we have a site already. I don't know whether we can ever come up with all those what ifs, but certainly if Chip took good notes, and I'm sure the chief and you took good notes, you can sort of compile something for Mr. Hammond, is it, to work with. But I think what up until now is missing is a little bit more of bringing the public along. And this is a great start, and I do thank you for all the time you've spent on the ad hoc committee. But sometimes it takes just a little bit of going through this for everyone to understand constraints, understand the difference between needs and wants, and those things.
Yeah, so I think, So thank you, everybody, for all of your comments, and you know, I know Chip has written them down, and I've written them down as well. The list of requirements is in the packet. So I think the problem the sort of problem I'm having right now is I can't really figure out from, you know, the comments here, like what our next actual steps are. And so, you know, to Karen, to your point, you know, to sort of a number of points, the second to last page of the staff report is a list of the requirements that we spent quite a bit of time hashing out. And if we have you know, and that is a very valid point of discussion, I think, that informs the next step. So there's a list, and you know, Paul talked about it. I talked about my pretty extensive conversation with Paul earlier about what goes into the police station. So that's the base of sort of where we are, and that's sort of the foundation of, you know, I think the discussion that where we want to go. And then to your point, to your question, Karen, about what we can support at Vista Lobos, I think that's what the committee and staff is asking for permission to do. Mm-hmm. So it's to spend the money to answer your question, not with, and the way I'm sort of thinking about it is not with 3 sites, you know, not spend 3 times X dollars, not do it at Vista Lobos and at one of the Sunset Center sites and with the, you know, sort of reducing the current police station to rubble and starting over, or remodeling the police station. We're asking for the opportunity to take half a step forward by evaluating the next step, if that makes sense. And so we're willing to do, you know, if you have, you know, if council members have questions about the things that are in the requirements, you know, if you don't think that, so for example, if you don't think that we need a community room, if we need to justify the presence of the community room on that list of requirements at the end, we are absolutely willing to do that. We'll prepare something for February or March and come back and say, this is why we need it. But we need to do that before we send Indigo and Mr. Hammond off to program the station to see how much space we need.
No,
Mr. Lobos, we
I
need to
wasn't,
understand where there's
I wasn't really questioning the schematic we've been given of all the things that a police station needs.
So that's
I understand that.
Okay.
That's okay. What I don't have a good feeling for, and what is the next step, is to actually look at the true existing issues with that Vista Lobos site, which you're asking for.
And that's
tonight.
and I think that's what we're asking. You know, that's the step that we want all of us to be comfortable with, that we're asking to take this half step forward with this one location, but not with all 3 locations. Like, let's start with one, and we'll, you know, whatever we uncover, and then we'll come back and we'll say, you know, this one is going to work, or this one isn't going to work, or whatever. And I think another thing I'd like to say is, I don't know, like, there have been a lot of comments about money money have been bandied around, and $30 million isn't the right number, and maybe it's going to be 40, or maybe it's going to be 50. I don't have any idea how much this is going to cost. Like, this is not, like, I don't know, when I look at the $30 million number, I don't have any idea whether this is the right number or not. But we have asked professionals to come up with numbers. Like, this is their job. Like, this is an architectural professional that has experience devising numbers for police stations. Like, and this is, you know, a ballpark number, $20 million, you know, $20 million for the new building, and then however much to reprogram the old one. So I think that's a good basis for deciding, you know, for how big of a project it is. I think that's a good starting point. And I think that as we move along, you know, so to use an example, you know, Karen, you know, we talked about excavating or moving the Vista Lobe, you know, excavating into the hill. I think as Indigo explores, the options, if we, eventually we get permission from the council to move forward with the Vista Lobos site, as we explore these options about building into the hill or not building into the hill, whatever, I think what we'll see is that this number will go up or down. It's going to cost $1.5 million to excavate, 6,000 cubic yards of dirt or whatever that number is. We'll see that $20 million number go up by $2 million. I mean, that's the only way we have to predict, And so I understand everybody's trepidation that the number is this mysterious number, but it's always going to be a mysterious number. There's no, we ask professionals and we deal with, we ask professionals and we.
So Jeff's done a really good job of framing the questions before us tonight. Do we have enough comfort to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the Vista Lobos lot, or do we want to go ahead and get more information back so the council is more comfortable moving forward? What do you think?
Well, I'd like to definitely get more information about the possible expansion, for example, with the site on the Carmel Youth Center. So I think one thing that perhaps I think we all could agree on the council is let's just drop any more talk about Sunset North Lot. I don't think that's worth spending any money at all exploring. But I certainly would like more the idea of perhaps expanding into the existing neighboring.
Okay.
For me, I would say, yeah. I think you should continue the path and continue to look at it. But now I think you're at a point where you should start bringing the community in and bring more community members in, or make it open to the public, whatever you want to do, however you want to run your ad hoc committee. But now's the time. But you have my support to move forward with this particular project.
Okay.
I definitely agree about getting the public involved now, and even slowing down our next, whether it's definitely not having February, but maybe March, maybe even April, but as long as we can get more community involvement, I think that's absolutely key now.
Okay.
I'm a little stuck on, and I guess this is a question for sort of Dave and Alessandra and staff. I'm a little stuck on whether we, and Bobby, since you've sort of given us permission, but now I'm a little stuck on whether we should, do we want to look at relocating, the organization inside the youth center building is ours, right? Mm-hmm. We lease it to the youth center. I mean, is that something that we, I ask, is that something we as a council want to consider, like asking them to find another location? And I would point out, sort of as an underlying, and I know Fred talked about this a number of times, time is not on our side here. And a lot of the things, I would hate to see us spend 2 or 3 years answering a series of questions that take 4 or 5 months to answer before we get permission to move forward. And so we need to sort of, it'd be better if we could answer these questions in parallel rather than having a new question that's going to take 6 months to answer. We do not want to leave the police in that building.
Can I comment on my line of thinking? This is how I'm thinking about this, and that's why I asked the view shed. Okay, a police station, I can't imagine being a 2-story police station or a 3-story police station or anything like that. So it seems to me that it makes sense to put a police station on Vista Lobos if we would actually feel like the highest and best use of a piece of property is going to be to go to the maximum amount, which is 35 feet or maybe less, right? So that seems like it would make sense to me to renovate with the mixed-use building on the current police and public works, where you have, and move police and public works to a single-story platform at Vista Lobos.
Can I ask you a question, Brandon? Could you do a little research? Could you do a little research into the 18-foot, the view shed requirement, like where it came from, and like what the benefit is? Like, I know it's in our code. We could change it. Yep. We could obviously, we're the council. I mean, we could change that if we wanted to. Absolutely. But I'm struggling with who the beneficiary of the view shed is, and if it's just a random view shed that's from 100 years ago, then maybe it's not.
Yeah, and we can do that, sir. It's because when we named it Vista Lobos, it was a view of Point Lobos, so it's really it's for the public
across the property, right? It's not.
But there's a park in the corner. He's gone, but there's the small park in the corner
that the cars take care of.
Pardon me?
That the cars take care of.
The cars and Mr. Byrne who left and yeah, in the southeast, in the southeast, I'm sorry, northeast corner.
But yeah, to answer your question, yes, we can see if we have anything in writing.
What it
just the
is.
lineage of that. Yeah.
Well, and I would also like to know, I've always been curious about what's behind those doors on Hennep Row and how deep that is, and can you go
trip.
back into those? And so, yeah, I think more information about actually the site at Vista Lobos and what is possible as far as possibly doing the underground part.
So in the interest of maybe bringing this to some closure, we do
Yeah.
have agenda review tomorrow, Bobby, at I think 11. Is that right, Nola?
Yeah.
So maybe we could go ahead and see if we can find a spot for this next month to go ahead and bring some more of these items that have been brought up today to some sense of closure for next month. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to go out and do soil samples and,
Well, that's,
and so
we're
on.
asking for permission. So next month, we would ask for permit. We're not going to have the soil samples by next month.
No.
Next month, we're going to ask for permission to do the work that Mr. Hammond spoke of.
Yeah, we wanted to do that formally with a resolution next month. But quite frankly, I mean, you have the ability to give us direction tonight, so if you'd like to.
Chip, may I add there? I mean, the contract already allows for moving forward on two concepts or two schematics. So contractually, you've already given the authority to do that. The subcommittee really wanted to make sure they were touching base with you and the public just so people knew what was going on so that we can do that. So
But somehow, Fred, tonight's morphed into us. We were going to make a decision on the viability of the site as a final drop-dead decision. That's not what we want to be doing tonight. I want to make sure we understand that. That what we're doing is we're just asking for further details, basically, on one site specific. That's what we're asking for.
Right.
I mean, for me, I think we've got enough direction.
Yeah, the list of things that we're asking for permission is at the end of the staff report,
exactly.
including to Alessandra's point and the public's point, including financing.
Yeah.
And many of the concerns articulated by council and public are the very things that will be measured as part of the schematic and concept. I mean, the architect will look at this site and will immediately start calculating what are the constraints, what are the opportunities, how are we going to do the traffic flow. There are all kinds of function as well as form questions that this next step will help answer, which will answer many of the questions you have as well as the public.
So potentially, if we got some problematic things out of this schematic, we could say, okay, we're not going to do that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's right. That's the whole point.
Exactly, and you could kill it,
Well-
and the next generation would say that it's not a viable site, so.
Right. I think what has happened, though, is this has come to the public's attention tonight, and it almost seems like a done deal rather than a further exploratory. So I think by what we've done tonight and the discussion, I mean.
There's a purpose of tonight, Karen. That's what we wanted to do tonight. We wanted to air this project out. I mean,
Right, but I think because it came with sort of a definite push towards Vista Lobos, the public may have felt a little left out of the process until now. So this is a good way of bringing the public in again, and then we'll have more information after this schematic.
We're getting credit then for the work we did.
What?
We're getting credit for the work the ad hoc did.
Yes, but I asked the question at the beginning, where's the public involved in the ad hoc? You know,
So I
with the
think that's,
housing element, we included the public almost from the get-go, and we had periodic meetings to bring the public in, and I think that's important to do.
So if we have your
So, thank
permission,
you.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I apologize. If we have your permission provide additional policy direction to move forward, we can promise you that when the results of the next part of the analysis are complete, we'll bring in the public to the ad hoc level and update them prior to coming back to council. We can do that.
Yep. Exactly.
I think tonight was really to help you and the public understand the full scope of what the subcommittee has looked at. I mean, have we missed any sites that would be possible that are big enough in this town that you own? Or do you actually want to consider buying parcels in this town at current prices? I don't think we did, but we may have. So it was really the committee trying to show you the dimensions of what they looked at to say, okay, this is why it kind of makes sense to look here. But as you just said, this is to explore, not to decide. I mean, it's still the collecting of information. And then we can report back what you...
Yes, we've got direction then.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, very good. Thank the public for your involvement too, really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we're then going to go to closed session. The one item in closed session, that is conference with the real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 5.4 and 956.8, property at First Murphy House, northeast corner of Lincoln Street, 6th Avenue, Carmel-by-the-Sea, City Administrator, City Attorney, negotiating parties, Carmel Heritage Society, Chamber of Commerce, under negotiation, lease amount and terms. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item before I go to the closed session?
Yes, Ms. Loomis is going. Loomis.
Mayor, council members, thank you for your time this evening. As you know, my name is Sigel Lomas, and I am here on behalf of the Carmel Chamber of Commerce. You have received a joint letter from the Carmel Heritage Society and the Carmel Chamber of Commerce outlining a proposal requesting the city to allow the two organizations to share the historic Murphy House as their joint office and second location for a visitor center. It is our belief that this will preserve the city's rich history and enhance the overall experience for visitors to Carmel-by-the-Sea. The Murphy House has tremendous educational and cultural value. By using it as a destination for visitors and opening it up to locals, we can offer guided tours, exhibitions, and educational programs that will allow people to connect with Carmel-by-the-Sea's rich history in a meaningful way. By joining forces, we can create a synergy that will benefit both organizations and the community at large. We are so excited about the endless possibilities through this great public partnership. A partnership that will allow the Murphy House to be open to the public 7 days a week. A place where residents and visitors, locals, are welcome to learn and explore our history while creating a sense of pride and belonging, while creating a stronger bond within our community. We respectfully request your consideration and support of this proposal to allow the Chamber and the Carmel Heritage Society to create a wonderful partnership by leasing the Murphy House to both entities. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Well done. All right, is there anybody else wishing to speak to this item before I close the public comment period and we go into closed session? I don't see anybody.
Cindy Lloyd, go ahead.
Cindy Lloyd.
I'll unmute you. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Cindy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor Potter, members of the council. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to understand what the proposal was for the First Murphy House. And I just want to say on first blush that I'm completely opposed to the Chamber taking over the First Murphy. I was there when that house was moved from its original location to the current location and know the tremendous pride and support it had from the Carmel Heritage Group that was very active at the time. It has been disconcerting to me that that First Murphy House has not been opened more extensively, but even more so, the Carmel Heritage Society is not really an active group that includes members of the public and residents. At any rate, I just want to go on record as saying at first blush, I really am opposed to the Chamber taking over the First Murphy. That was not the intent of the moving the First Murphy from the place where Mike Murphy had built it to the current location. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Saying no.
There's no more
Okay,
speakers.
that's it. We're going to close the public comment period. We'll go to the closed session. Thank you all for your patience.
My partner, Robert Messenger, is going to zoom in.
Yeah.
He needs to be let in.
Yeah. Oh.